Hi guys, my name is Sissy and I am 33 years old. I'm 33 and a half, nearly turning 34 next year in March. But I have had menopause in my mind for about 2 years now since I had a hysterectomy. So a hysterectomy is where they remove your uterus. And so I am technically postmenopausal. So menopause means 1 year after your last period. So for me, my last period was actually February 2022. And I know because I was trying to conceive, and so I was tracking my periods. And so my last period was February 2022, which means that I was actually 31 because my birthday is in March. I was actually 30, sorry. So I hadn't even turned 31. So my last period was in my 30s. And so anyway, I've done a video on this on my channel, but what happened is that I had a complicated pregnancy that had placenta previa and placenta accreta spectrum, which meant that I lost a lot of blood, and in order to save my life, they had to take out the uterus. The good thing is that this was identified while I was still pregnant, so I had a longer time to process it because there's someone that sent me a message and she wasn't even aware. She went in for the operation as usual and they couldn't stop the bleeding, and then they had to take out her uterus, and then she came out of the operation expecting to just have a baby, but then she didn't have a baby, but then she also didn't have a uterus. So I'm grateful that I even had that time to process the whole thing a little bit in advance. Another thing I'm grateful for is that I have actually had children. So menopause came into my mind because by the time I had my operation, they removed my uterus, but they didn't remove my ovaries. That means I still have my hormones. And my consultant did tell me that even though I still had my ovaries, I was likely to go into menopause earlier than I would have because everything is like in a balance. The hormones go up and down, and then you have a period, and then the cycle repeats. So for me, the hormones are probably going up and down still, but the period part has been removed, so something is out of balance. So anyway, I do believe her. I feel like, yeah, definitely, I'll probably go into menopause earlier. The average age at which someone goes into menopause varies from country to country, and in the UK, it's about 51, but that's on average, that's usually white British people. And Black Africans are more likely to go into menopause earlier at an average age of 49. And I think I saw Asians going earlier as well at around like 47. So anyway, for me, it's like the menopause conversation came to my life 20 years earlier than it should have. 20 years earlier, just thinking about it. And so the consultant said it might be like 5 years or maybe 5 years earlier than I would have. So if I imagine that I would have gone into menopause at 49 minus 5 means 44, around there, and I am 33, nearly 34, so I have like 10 years 10 years left. So anyway, I've been thinking a lot about menopause. I've been reading a lot about it, attending a lot of conferences and things. I attended a conference recently on menopause and mental health. So in this video, I wanted to share all the information that I'm collecting for my sake and for the sake of others who might be interested, because menopause is a topic that we don't talk a lot about, and yet it's a big part that affects everyone, because it affects so a big part of the population will go through menopause if you're lucky enough to live long enough, but then also usually it affects also the people around us, like our partners, our workmates, our friends, our family. So menopause in that way affects everyone, but yet you don't hear it talked about much. Unlike, for example, like menstruation or menarche, which is first period, like that's something that you hear a lot about. Even as you're growing up, you hear a lot about periods, but you don't hear a lot about them ending and what happens after, which is why I've been trying to educate myself and talk to people a lot. I talked to my mom in her video about her experience of menopause. I talked to all the ladies around me. I asked them what's it like. And yeah, so I'm really into the topic now. So first, I want to talk about life without periods for me personally, and I wanted to say that life without periods is not bad at all. I haven't had a period in like almost 3 years, and you just completely forget about it. In fact, I was just seeing my targeted ads were giving me a lot of period pants, period adverts, and I'm like, why are they doing this? Like, it didn't apply to me at all. Like, it's like something that never happened. Like, you move on with your life, so I don't have to think about tampons. I was going to say nappies. I don't have to think about tampons, pads, any of those things. I don't have menstrual pain, like cramps. My cramps aren't bad, but I don't have any of that. Like, my life just moves on. The only thing I miss is that, you know how you have the hormonal changes where there will be certain parts of your period, of your menstrual cycle rather, where you are. So for me, it's it used to be anyway, just before my period, I would get a bit more irritable, more moody, and also sad. I would also get a bit sad, and I sometimes get like a pimple on my face, some skin changes, but that's not been happening as much. I recently got a skin change, and I was like, oh, maybe it's that time of the month. But for me, my skin doesn't change that much drastically for me to tell the difference. But my mood sometimes does. Sometimes I get a bit sad, a bit irritable. And before, when I used to have periods, I would get a bit sad and irritable and moody, and maybe I'm being a bit snappy to my partner. And then after a few days, I get a period. I'm like, oh, so that's what was happening. So that's how the period was helpful for me to know what's going on. But as per now, I can't actually tell. Like, I can't tell at which point of the cycle I am in. I just live my life until, until sometimes I had started trying to track, actually. I had started a mood diary to see if it would let me know if it's exactly like, let's say, 28 days, because my cycle rather, was a 28-day one, so it was quite regular. And I think if I was consistent with that, I'd probably notice a pattern, but I haven't for now, actually. So another thing I wanted to talk about is perimenopause. So I've explained what menopause is, which is 1 year after your last period, which is a diagnosis. It's something you can only say when it has already happened, because you never know when you have your last period if this will be your very last one. So menopause is just 1 day. It's 1 year after your last period. That's menopause. Pause. And then postmenopause is the time after. And then the years leading up to menopause are called the perimenopause. And perimenopause is on average about 5 to 8 years to the menopause. So that can happen as early as your late 30s, actually, because remember, it happens at any, it can happen at, the menopause itself happens at various ages for different people. So even your early 30s, you can start getting perimenopause. And perimenopause is a period of time where your hormones start fluctuating a lot. They're starting to come down generally, but they're fluctuating a lot. So some people find that their periods are very frequent, and other people find the periods are more spaced out. So your body is like in chaos. So that might bring with it a lot of the hormonal like symptoms of like menopause and perimenopause. There are a lot of them. It's not just the famous ones like hot flashes, but a lot of, I want to focus more on the mental health changes, because I have just attended a conference on mental health and menopause, and I was telling us about the different changes. And as a psychiatrist, it's important that I know this for my patients, but also for myself, because the sex hormones, which are estrogen, progesterone, and testosterone, are important for our entire body. They affect every single cell in our body. It's not just about reproduction. So that's why you find that if along your menstrual cycle, you're going to be affected by the different hormonal fluctuations. So if your estrogen is low, that can cause you to have a low mood, sadness, anxiety, irritability. If your progesterone is low, it can also cause you to have mood changes as well, but also it's more likely to cause you to have rage. Like, rage is a symptom that was mentioned that was new to me. So rage, not just anger, like extreme anger. And then low testosterone also affects self-esteem, self-confidence, and feeling like if your testosterone goes too low, then you start to feel like that, like you're not so confident in yourself anymore. So the different hormones have different effects on our mood. And actually, in the conference, they were saying that the brain changes of the low hormones happen before the physical health ones. So before the hot flashes that you've heard about, before like skin changes, like skin might lose elasticity, and bones as well. When the hormones are low, it affects your bones. Your bones are more likely to become weaker, like spongy, and so they easily break. In terms of weight changes, menopause can cause you, or perimenopause and menopause causes your weight to, like, you're more likely to gain weight, and especially around your tummy, around your abdomen, you're more likely to gain weight that way, and the weight is harder to lose. So I saw somewhere else that someone was mentioning, her name is Dr. Mary Claire. She's a menopause specialist based in the US. She has lots of videos on YouTube, on Instagram, and she was saying somewhere in some podcast I was listening to that the abdominal fat becomes like an extra ovary. It's like a third ovary, like your body is trying to compensate and find ways. So if you remember, like when you're starting periods, or when little girls are maybe overweight or they are bigger in size, overweight or generally bigger, they're more likely to start their periods earlier, because the fat cells are related in hormone production. There's something that they produce that I think is kind of like a hormone kind of thing. This isn't my field of expertise professionally, but from my understanding, that's how it works, is that the fat cells produce, they're like hormones, I think. If you understand better, please can you let us know below. So anyway, the fat cells do that. So that's why little girls might go into puberty earlier if they're bigger or overweight. But also, people who have low BMI are more likely to go into menopause earlier, because I guess they've run out of any reserves of like hormones. So also when you're menopausal, you're more likely to have that abdominal fat that is harder to lose, harder to shift, because your body needs it actually, because your hormones are so important. It's trying to find all other sources of hormones. So in terms of things I am trying to do to manage myself or to plan for the menopause, is that I am trying to push myself in the best shape that I can in advance, because once you are menopausal, the first thing they advise you is lifestyle and lifestyle changes. So they advise you to do lifestyle changes, and if that doesn't work, then they advise you hormones. Like there's hormones that are, there's oral ones, but there's also topical ones, which I'll cover later. First, I want to talk about the lifestyle modification. So the first one is diet and exercise. You want to be having a sensible diet that doesn't have as very high ultra processed foods. So I am trying to minimize my ultra processed food intake and try and have more of the whole foods. And I think that is something that's really worth doing. So I've started that. It's been about a year of changes in my lifestyle. I made another video about how I came to that decision and how I am maintaining it, that you can watch down below. In terms of exercise, I am now exercising about 5 times a week. So I do a lot of strength training, because in the menopause and perimenopause, you are more likely to have the weak bones, and working out helps increase bone density. So not just any working out, specifically strength training. So if you look up strength training, it's the one that's for strength, not necessarily for like aerobics. It's not like for raising your heart rate, HIIT only. No, it's like weights, and there's body weight exercises as well, not only weights, but me, I use dumbbells for the most of my exercises. So that's something that I'm doing to help myself. In terms of diet, they mentioned a Mediterranean diet being really good. I personally am not following specifically a Mediterranean diet, but I'm eating foods that I feel like are good for me. And the other thing they mentioned was caffeine and reducing caffeine intake. Caffeine makes some symptoms of menopause worse, and I think it was the hot flashes, or was it the irritability, probably, or the anxiety. I think, at least I know caffeine makes anxiety worse, and caffeine makes irritability worse. So anyway, what I've decided to do is try and cut down and stop taking caffeine or coffee, because I was taking coffee in the mornings, only black, no sugar, because I also do intermittent fasting. So in the time when it's not yet my time to eat, then I was taking black coffee, because mostly for coldness, like when you're cold, to just warm up your body. And I think I'm going to stop taking that. I'm going to start taking green tea instead, if I can stand the taste, or even hot water. Today morning I took only hot water, because I also read hot water is really good, and it actually does the job of warming up the body. The problem with caffeine as well is that it stains your teeth, so I am not sad about stopping to take that. The other thing in the diet that's not recommended is alcohol. So I already don't take much alcohol. I am more of a social drinker. I only drink only if we're going to a party and maybe there's alcohol, and it has to be like sweet. I don't like bitter alcohol, of which most alcohol is bitter anyway. So really, for me, it's not really a big change of alcohol. I'm just going to stop taking it altogether, because the more you go into menopause days, then it's even harder for you to metabolize. So you're affected much more than if you used to take a little bit of alcohol. That same amount will affect you differently when you're older. So for me, I've stopped taking alcohol because of that. My husband also does not take any alcohol at all, so it's easier, because it's another reason why I don't take much alcohol, because it's hard to take alcohol when you have someone who is like maybe so judgy. Because for him, he was really judgy. He'll look at me like, what am I thinking? What am I, just give up. Another thing that I am taking is vitamin D. So vitamin D, I have been taking my vitamin D supplements, but I wasn't super consistent. But I am now even more consistent for the purpose of menopause. The reason is because vitamin D is what is called a precursor. So In other words, it's an ingredient. It's a major ingredient for the sex hormones. So if you don't have enough vitamin D, then the hormones will go even lower and lower and lower. So at least if you have enough precursor, then give your body a chance to try and find a way to use the vitamin D to make some hormones. So do take your vitamin D, guys. I actually take the high strength vitamin D that you can get over the counter, because I am also more likely to have low vitamin D because I'm black. So if you're an African like me, then you are more likely to have low vitamin D, because our skin needs more sun. So especially if you're out here in the diaspora, because our skin needs more sun to absorb enough vitamin D. So what happens is that the sun actually doesn't give you vitamin D. The sun helps convert a certain chemical in your skin to vitamin D. So you need more sun to do that because your skin is darker. So you need vitamin D. And even if you're back home, wherever you are, but like maybe in Uganda, a lot of people are in Uganda, but they're like in the shade. They don't expose themselves to the sun. Try and get some sun exposure, but ideally it's the morning sun, not the harsh afternoon one, which is good for our vitamin D. Another thing I'm trying to do is manage my stress, because stress management is an important life skill. And also, the more stressed you are, the worse for your body. The higher cortisol, the stress hormones, which increase your blood pressure, increase your blood sugar, you're likely to get diabetes. So I don't want to have so much stress in my life. And the ways I'm trying to do that is by, number one, reducing the things that I do, because I have a tendency to do too much, and I'm now reducing the things that I do. I'm saying no more, because I don't want to get too busy and get too stressed. I, for example, I was nominated to be president for British Ugandan Doctors Association, Buddha, but I turned that down because I do not have the time to be doing that, honestly. At this time in my life, when my kids are still little, that alone is a lot. So I'm trying to minimize the stress. And also when my kids are like a bit annoying sometimes, I'm trying not to be too annoyed with them, because at the end of the day, they're kids, they're being kids. So I'm trying not to get too annoyed with things. Emotional regulation, really, it's like an emotional regulation skill that I'm practicing. And finally, I wanted to move on to the medication options or treatment options, especially for me to consider in future. And the first one is to consider supplements. Reason being that, so the reason anyway is because my mom does take a supplement called Menopause that she says is helpful for her. She's found it helpful. There's a lot of them. If you search Boots, there are a lot of supplements, which a lot of the menopause specialists say aren't all that, but some are not bad, they say. So anyway, the one she takes is Menopause. I think I would consider trying one of these first, probably. Trying them out and seeing if they work. And if they don't, then I would be quick to ditch them and move on to the next thing, which is hormone replacement therapy. Hormone replacement therapy is where they give you hormones, and the ones that they use now are called bioidentical, yeah, so they are pretty identical to the real hormones, and that's estrogen, progesterone, and testosterone. Currently, testosterone is not being provided by the NHS, but you can get it via private providers, and it can also be helpful, like all of them. So there's a lot of fear for hormones, especially because there was a study that was done around in 2002 that showed that they increase the risk of breast cancer, and apparently that study was misinterpreted, and apparently there is a small increased risk of breast cancer, but the risk is so much smaller than, let's say, if you're obese or if you have a very bad diet and lifestyle. Like, there's more things that are more common that increase the risk of breast cancer more than taking hormones, hormone replacement therapy. And yeah, so for me personally, I would definitely consider it. And the good thing is that I've had a hysterectomy, so I don't have a uterus. So that means I even have more options of hormone replacement therapy. So if you have a uterus, you must have estrogen together with progesterone. However, if you don't have a uterus, then it's okay for you to have estrogen alone. Reason being that estrogen alone can increase the risk of endometrial cancer, I think. So that's why they give you plus progesterone as well. So anyway, there's more options for hormone replacement therapy, especially if you don't have a uterus. And even if you have a uterus, I think it's something that's worth considering. At least you try it. Try it for 3 months and see how you feel. Because given that way the side effects can be so uncomfortable of menopause, you want to weigh and see, would you rather face side effects of menopause or face side effects of the medication? So another side effect that I hadn't mentioned was brain fog, which is a common side effect. It's a common menopausal symptom that people experience. I think I've had brain fog before, and that was at a time when they found out that I had low folic acid. So I had like brain fog. My brain was feeling unclear. Like I'd wake up and I'd feel like I'm not waking up properly. I'm feeling unclear, not clear-headed. I was even having cold showers, but I would still feel like my brain is like foggy, not clear. So if I was having that long term, I would be very quick personally to consider hormone replacement therapy. So that is it in terms of the things that I am doing or that I know for now to prepare myself for the menopause. Let me know below. Have you thought about menopause? Why have you thought about menopause? Or are you thinking that, I don't know, like what are your thoughts about menopause? And what are you doing to prepare yourself for the menopause? If you want to watch a video in which I talk about how I finally came around to making the lifestyle changes in my diet and exercise, then watch this video here in which I explain how I went through therapy and how I got to that point.